Hey YouTube, I'm Anna O, and today I'm going to show you how to replace the alternator in a 2005 Chevrolet Trailblazer. We've got a 3/8 inch drive ratchet with a pipe. This is for loosening tension on the serpentine belt. A battery disconnect tool. You don't have to have a specialty tool like that. You can use like a socket or just a regular wrench to disconnect the negative terminal of the battery. 15mm socket, 10mm socket, ratchets for both. I've got a short 15mm wrench to access the bottom bolt of the alternator. We'll talk more about that. And you may not need either of these. Just depend. Well, you'll probably need the extension. You probably won't need the crow's foot, but I have that there as a solution to a challenging bottom bolt of that alternator. Okay, and then of course we've got our alternator. I got an AC Delco that was remanufactured. This is the alternator here. So what we'll have to do is take the serpentine belt off, just the pulley, just at this pulley here. And the tensioner is over here. You see it marked with white right there. That's the receiving hole for the 3/8 inch drive to take the tension off the belt. So we'll take that off, and then we'll take 2 bolts off of this bracket, 3 bolts off the bracket here. So we've got 2 right here, and there's 1 back there, and then there's supposed to be 1 here, but it seems I forgot it the last time I did this. So embarrassing, not like me. Don't judge me, or judge me, whatever. Anyway, so then once we got the bracket off, there are 2 bolts at the top of this alternator and 1 underneath, and then there's an electrical clip at the back, and then the battery cable also at the back held on with a 10mm retaining nut. So I'll show you each step. I'll get set up here and we'll get started. Forgot to mention, what we're going to do first is disconnect the negative battery terminal for safety. And I just like to see how it bounced like right back to, I don't know if you can see, right back to where it goes. So what I'm going to do is put something behind there to keep it from just bouncing back and making that connection. Okay, first thing we're going to do is relieve tension on the serpentine belt. So I've got my 3/8 inch drive ratchet with a pipe, and it goes directly down here into this receiving hole on the tensioner. Just pop that in, and then apply pressure toward the driver's side of the vehicle. It takes some tension off of the belt, and then I just slip it off of the pulley that I need. You don't have to take it all the way off. And now is a really good time to check the condition of your belt to make sure there's no like fraying or like dry rot or cracks in here. It'd be easier to take it all the way off to perform a more thorough inspection, but I just had it off last month and I feel pretty good about it, so I'm going to leave it. And then don't just like let the handle fly back. Let it rest against the upper radiator hose, and be careful going around this this sensor, this electrical connection. This is your camshaft position sensor, and you don't want to mess that up. So now I am going to take these bolts off of here. So I need my 15mm socket and ratchet. So there's a 3rd bolt, 15mm again, back down in there. Don't know if you can see it from here. Let's see. Can almost see it. Not quite. Okay, but anyway, so what I have found to work is to go in from the back with a 6-inch extension. And before you would do that, you would take off this there's a 10mm bolt here that I don't have right now. I was careless last time. So you would take that off, and it frees that up to move around a little bit. And then we'll go in, I'm not going to put the ratchet on yet. We'll go in from the back here and get this. So a tip I learned from Steve Young is to keep this 6-inch extension on and socket on this bolt as you back it out so that you don't drop it. This is where you might run into trouble. So there are 2 15mm bolts at the top and one 15mm bolt at the bottom that holds the alternator in place. These two at the top are pretty accessible, but the one at the bottom is really difficult to access because there's this, what I think is an AC line, and it's rigid. So you can't get like a socket on there with a ratchet. You can get the socket, but not the ratchet. Or at least I couldn't in mine. I watched a ton of videos on those other two jobs that I've had to do before that require getting that out of the way. And none of them seem to run into trouble, so your mileage may vary. So the first time I tried it, I was not successful whatsoever, and I gave up. And then the second time I tried it, I used a crow's foot wrench. So that's why I had that crow's foot out. So I got this on there with a 6-inch extension and a ratchet and broke it loose that way, and then backed it out the rest of the way with this short wrench. So we'll use this today because I didn't snug it down too tight, so it should be able to come loose pretty easily using that short wrench. And so it's difficult because you have limited space, not only to the side this way, but you also have limited space at the front. So like getting the handle of a ratchet in there for leverage is difficult because you risk damaging the fan blades, and you don't want to do that because you have to replace it, and this is a huge pain in the ass to do. So proceed with caution. Yeah, the short wrench worked well for me, just the open end, not the, like I couldn't get the closed end on the whole thing because it's just too tight in there. But maybe if anybody has some solutions to this problem, they could comment below and help everyone out. That'd be great. Okay, so I've got my wrench on there, and I can only make about a quarter turn at a time. So this will take a little bit of time. So you're not going to be able to pull that bottom alternator bolt out all the way before you take the alternator out. Like, it's going to have to come out with the alternator itself. You just need to get it clear from the engine block to be able to manipulate the alternator itself. Okay. Because there's just not space. Alright, there we go. So, that's it. And we're all up in the fan. And then there's an electrical connection here, and if you have a little screwdriver, that can be helpful to get this little tab over the, I don't even know what it would be called, but just enough to pull that out. There we go. And, whew, you can see the little retaining nut on there, and that's a 10mm, and there's some corrosion on mine, so hopefully it comes out okay. Battery cable off. Okay. Oh, this is so much easier with two hands. There we go. Alright, so now we're free to take the alternator out. Oh, I'm going to take that bolt out at the bottom. Don't lose that bottom bolt. We are caught in that fan. I told you to be careful about getting around. Normally you would want to compare part numbers to be sure you got the right thing, but I can't find a part number on this older one. But it looks like the mounting bolts are the same, and very important to make sure that your electrical connection is also the same. So we've got 4-prong electrical connectors in each of these, so they look good. So remove the retaining nut on the new alternator. And then installation is the reverse of removal. So now, before I let it go, I'll get that bolt in there. I think. There we go. Yep. Oh yeah, you going in there now. Oh yeah, we got you now. We got you now. Alright. Whew. So, gotta get this battery cable Install. There we go. Yep. And then we'll get the retaining nut to put back on there. Alright, put my ratchet on there and snug it down. I'll get the boot to cover it. Okay. Whew, okay. Home stretch. And then put this electrical connection back on. Very important. Till it clicks and goes over that little notch. I'm going to go ahead and set this up and go in so that I'm not trying to put that bolt in like a precarious kind of position and risk dropping it down in there and having to fish it out, because that would be annoying. You don't want to cross thread it, so just hand tighten. You know, and if you feel resistance, back it out and start over. You don't want to cross thread the engine block itself, because then you're really screwed. The fan shroud has a belt diagram, so my dad colored this with whiteout so it's easier to see in the dark, and so it gives you the routing diagram to follow, and so you just make sure that your serpentine belt follows that pattern. So we'll go ahead and put that on, get it situated on this power steering pulley first. Here we go. So now I've got, so relieve tension on the belt. Slip that belt back on. Alright, make sure that all looks lined up. Okay, and gently let go. And just kind of check and triple check. Make sure everything looks like it's on there straight, like it's not gonna be at any kind of angle or anything like that. And then you can take your 3/8 drive out. There we go. Alright. Just reconnect the battery. Let's see if it'll crank. So I usually give it just a minute to kind of get situated with the battery having been disconnected. So anytime you disconnect the battery, the computer gets reset. You'll want to go through an idle relearn procedure with this car. And so this is outlined in the Haynes manual, but essentially what you want to do is crank it, let it run at idle until it gets up to operating temperature. And then once it's at operating temperature, to increase the RPMs up to about 1200 and hold it there for 2 minutes, I think. And then you can let off the throttle and take it for a drive around the block. So for like 5 minutes across varied driving conditions, and that will help it relearn the idle. You don't have to do that, like you'll be fine if you don't, but your driving conditions might be a little bit erratic, like it might surge or not stall necessarily, but the RPMs will kind of ebb and flow for a little bit until it's kind of settled into this learned pattern of where it needs to be. And it usually accomplishes that within, I think I read somewhere like 20 drive cycles. So if you don't do this idle relearn procedure, it's not the end of the world. Just know that it's going to take a little bit of time for it to relearn where to be. Okay, so let's crank it. Okay. Shoot. I think I just need to maybe jump then. So I'm going to do that. Okay. All right, we got it started with this awesome little compact jump start battery pack. So I'm going to get that disconnected and we'll let this run for a while and do our idle relearn procedure. Okay, so I just got back from about a 10-minute test drive, and I just stayed like within about a 1 mile radius of my house, just in case I had to leave my car and walk home. And that gauge did not deviate from the 14 volts, so I think we're good.